When we think of American automotive history, names like the Mustang, the Corvette, and the Model T usually come to mind, cars built in the millions that put the world on wheels. But hidden in the margins of history are the low-volume experiments, the desperate gambles, and the engineering marvels that were simply too ahead of their time to succeed in the mass market. I wanted to go over 10 ultra-rare American vintage cars that didn't just sit in a garage, they fundamentally changed how the world understood the automobile. These aren't just rare because nobody bought them, they are rare because they were pioneers, pushing boundaries in aerodynamics, safety, and propulsion long before the technology was ready to catch up. From jet-age experiments to the birth of the supercar, these vehicles set the stage for the modern era. Without further ado, here are the top 10 ultra-rare American vintage cars that changed the world. Starting off at number 10, we have the 1962 Oldsmobile Jetfire. Most people assume the turbocharger is a relatively modern invention in passenger cars, popularized by the Europeans in the 70s or the Japanese in the 90s. But Oldsmobile beat them all to the punch. In an attempt to squeeze V8 power out of a lighter package, GM released the Jetfire Coupe. Under the hood was the aluminum 215 cubic inch V8, but with a Garrett T5 turbo strapped to it. It produced 215 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, allowing it to hit 0 to 60 in around 8.5 seconds. That was seriously quick for a small V8 in the early 60s. The engineering challenge was managing detonation with the high compression of that era. Oldsmobile's solution was a system called turbo rocket fluid, a mixture of distilled water, methanol, and corrosion inhibitor injected directly into the airstream. It was brilliant, but it was also its downfall. Owners would forget to refill the fluid, the safety systems would cut the boost, and performance would plummet. Reliability issues plagued the car, and Oldsmobile offered to swap the turbo units for standard 4-barrel carburetors for free. Because of this, finding an original, intact Jetfire today is nearly impossible, but its legacy is undeniable. It proved that forced induction was the future of performance efficiency. Next up is a vehicle that redefined what a family car could look like, the 1936 Stout Scarab. If you drive a minivan or a crossover today, you have William Stout to thank. In the 1930s, cars were built with separate fenders, running boards, and long hoods. Stout, an aviation engineer, decided to scrap that entire philosophy. He built a unibody, rear-engine, rear-wheel drive lounge on wheels. It utilized a Ford flathead V8, pushing about 85 horsepower, but the engine wasn't the point, the space was. By pushing the wheels to the absolute corners and moving the engine to the back, the interior volume was massive. It featured a configurable interior with a small table and swiveling seats, features we see in luxury vans today. At a price of $5,000 in 1936, roughly $110,000 in today's money, it was astronomically expensive. Sources estimate that only 9 were ever built. It was too weird and too costly for the Depression-era public, but the Scarab is widely considered the world's first minivan. It anticipated the shape of the automobile nearly 50 years before the Dodge Caravan arrived. At number 8, we have the 1954 Kaiser Darrin. By the mid-50s, Kaiser Motors was desperate to stay relevant against the Big Three. They needed a halo car, something to grab headlines. The result was the Darrin, the first American production car to feature fiberglass body, beating the Corvette to the market by a matter of months. Under the hood, it wasn't exactly a powerhouse, sporting a 161 cubic inch Willys F-head inline-6, making just 90 horsepower. It wasn't fast, but the design was revolutionary. The most distinct feature was the pocket doors that slid forward into the front fenders, a design that has never really been replicated since. It was a fascinating solution to a problem that didn't really exist, but it looked incredible.
High production costs and a snowstorm that ruined 50 of the bodies at the factory killed the momentum. Only 435 were built. While it was a commercial failure, the Darren proved that fiberglass was a viable material for car bodies, paving the way for the Corvette and countless kit cars that followed. Moving on to number 7, one of the most controversial cars in American history, the 1948 Tucker 48. Preston Tucker wanted to build the safest, most advanced car on the road. The Torpedo, as it was nicknamed, featured a rear-mounted flat-six engine adapted from a Bell helicopter, producing 166 horsepower and a massive 372 pound-feet of torque. It was powerful, but the focus was on safety. It had a padded dashboard, a pop-out windshield designed to eject during a crash to prevent injury, and a center Cyclops headlight that turned with the steering wheel, a feature we see on high-end luxury cars today. The Big Three and the SEC did not make life easy for Tucker, and after a highly publicized fraud trial, of which he was acquitted, the company folded. Only 51 units were completed. Today, they're worth millions. The Tucker 48 showed the industry that safety could be a selling point, forcing the major manufacturers to eventually adopt features like seatbelts and padded dashes decades later. At number 6, we have the 1963 Chrysler Turbine Car. This is perhaps the most famous what-if in automotive history. In the jet age, Chrysler decided to see if a gas turbine engine could work in a passenger car. The bodies were hand-built by Ghia in Italy and shipped to Detroit to have the turbine engines installed. These engines could run on anything combustible: diesel, unleaded gas, kerosene, or jet fuel, as the legend goes. The engine produced 130 horsepower and an impressive 425 pound-feet of torque, available instantly, all while spinning at over 44,000 RPM.
Chrysler built 55 of them and gave them to regular families to test drive for 3 months at a time. The drivers loved the smoothness and the futuristic whirring sound, but the fuel economy was poor, hovering around 13 mpg, and the exhaust temperatures were scorching. When the program ended, Chrysler crushed almost all of them to avoid import duties. Only 9 survived. It remains the only time a major manufacturer seriously attempted to move the world away from the piston engine on a consumer level. Breaking into the top 5, we have the 1911 Mercer Raceabout. In the early days of the automobile, cars were carriage-like and cumbersome. The Mercer Raceabout stripped everything away. It was essentially a chassis, 2 seats, a gas tank, and an engine. That engine was a 300 cubic inch T-head 4-cylinder, putting out about 58 horsepower. That doesn't sound like much, but the car weighed practically nothing. It was capable of speeds over 90 miles per hour right off the showroom floor, which was terrifyingly fast for 1911. Sources estimate only a few hundred were built, and very few survive today. The Raceabout is significant because it invented the concept of the American sports car. It wasn't about transportation, it was about the thrill of driving. It laid the groundwork for everything from the Stutz Bearcat to the Shelby Cobra. Speaking of electric ambitions, number 4 is the 1996 GM EV1. Long before Tesla was a household name, General Motors spent over $1 billion developing the EV1. It was the first mass-produced electric vehicle of the modern era from a major automaker. The engineering was cutting-edge: an aluminum space frame, composite body panels, and a drag coefficient of 0.19, which is still sleeker than almost anything on the road today. The Gen 2 models with nickel metal hydride batteries had a range of up to 140 miles. The electric motor produced 137 horsepower and 110 pound-feet of torque, making it zippy around town. However, GM claimed they couldn't make a profit on them. They were lease-only, and in 2003, GM controversially recalled all of them and crushed the vast majority. A few disabled units went to museums. It was a PR disaster, but the EV1 proved that an electric car could be a viable, fun daily driver. It sparked the battery technology race that eventually led to the EV revolution we are seeing today. At number 3, we have the 1965 Shelby Cobra 427 SC. You can't talk about rare American cars without mentioning the ultimate weapon from Carroll Shelby. The 427 Cobra was the result of stuffing a massive Ford big block FE engine into the lightweight AC Ace. The SC stood for semi-competition. Shelby had built competition cars to race, but when they failed to meet the homologation count for the FIA, he slapped windshields on them and sold them as road cars. The 427 side-oiler V8 produced a conservatively rated 485 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. In a car that weighed just over 2,300 pounds, the performance was violent. 0 to 60 happened in just over 4 seconds in 1965. Only 29 legitimate SC models were built. The Cobra 427 changed the world by setting the template for the American muscle philosophy: excessive horsepower in a light chassis. It forced European manufacturers to rethink their approach to performance. At number 2, the 1935 Duesenberg SJ. In the depths of the Great Depression, while most Americans were struggling to buy a Ford, Duesenberg was building the finest cars in the world. The Model J was already impressive, but the SJ added a centrifugal supercharger to the 420 cubic inch straight-eight. It produced 320 horsepower. To put that in perspective, a standard Ford V8 made 85 horsepower. The SJ could hit 104 miles per hour in second gear and top out near 140. It was the Bugatti Veyron of its day. The SJ designation is retroactively applied by enthusiasts, and it is estimated that only 36 supercharged models were originally built. The Duesenberg SJ proved that American engineering could stand toe-to-toe and often surpass the best from Rolls-Royce and Mercedes-Benz. It established the United States as a producer of world-class speed. And finally, at number 1, the car that changed the geopolitical map of the world, the 1940 Bantam BRC-40. When the U.S. Army needed a light reconnaissance vehicle for World War II, they sent out a request for proposals. American Bantam, a bankrupt company in Pennsylvania, was the only one to deliver a prototype on time. The Bantam Recon Car, or BRC, featured 4-wheel drive, a simple 45-horsepower Continental engine, and a rugged, boxy design. It was the blueprint. Because Bantam was too small to produce the volume the Army needed, the government handed the blueprints to Ford and Willys. The result was the Jeep. But the BRC-40 was the genesis. Only around 2,600 were built, and most were sent to Russia or Great Britain via Lend-Lease, making survivors in the States incredibly rare. Without the Bantam BRC-40, the Allies might not have had the mobility to win the war, and the entire category of the SUV and off-road vehicle might never have existed. It is the grandfather of every Land Rover, Land Cruiser, and Wrangler on the road today. And there you have it. 10 ultra-rare American vintage cars that did more than just drive down the road. They shifted the course of history. Whether it was through safety, propulsion, or sheer brute force, these machines left a mark that we can still see in the cars we drive today. It's fascinating to think that some of the most influential vehicles were the ones that barely anyone bought. I'd love to know which one of these you would take home if money was no object. I think for me, the Chrysler Turbine is just too cool to pass up, even with the terrible fuel economy. Let me know if I missed any other game changers. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next week.